Hey YouTube, coming at you today with a little bit of a different take. Every time we go to feed our fish, we get our bottle, bag, can of food, and we dump it in the tank, the food that we're going to feed. Very little do we have to be concerned about what is in the composition of our fish food. And that's because food manufactured in the United States has FDA regulations that require the mills that process the food to meet regulations on quality of the content of their food, quality of unusual foods. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, since the early 1900s, has been in the business of making sure that the food we eat for human consumption and the food that we give to our animals, pets, fish, is safe within reason. So we don't have to worry when we buy an American manufactured fish food, and we also don't really have to worry when we buy a fish food that's manufactured outside the United States, because that food has been tested by the FDA randomly and ensured to contain no poisons, diseases, something that would harm our fish. But that is changing. How much it's changing is kind of still up in the air. I spoke to an official at the FDA who also happened to be a fish keeper, which was encouraging for me to hear. So I knew he understood exactly what I was asking. And he seemed to feel like that the changes that are going on at the FDA right now will not so much affect the safety of fish food, pet food, as it is in other areas. But from a lot of the conjecture, and I'll admit at this point that it is still conjecture, there is going to be a serious decrease in staffing at the FDA. The funding is going to be steeply reduced. And that will mean that there are less people out there testing. There also is a move for deregulation going on. And probably this is because drug companies want to be able to bypass all the regulation and save money producing drugs to market. And that's a whole nother ball of wax. What I'm concerned about, what we as fish keepers need to be concerned about, is that the FDA is still standing in testing products, regulating manufacturers, so that the quality of our food and the safety of our fish food is not being reduced. There are other changes afoot as well at the FDA, and one of them is going to reduce our ability as citizens to access histories of FDA finding problems and the steps that were taken to remediate those problems. We are now probably going to have to file a Freedom of Information Act to access the safety records of a company that produces our fish food. While this does not defeat our ability to understand the safety of our fish food, it's going to make it a little more difficult. Now, there are some groups that take it upon themselves to cover these issues, and I'll put links for those in my below in the discussion area, the description area. I went into this call to this official, senior animal scientist at the FDA, with a lot of fear, with a lot of feeling like I was no longer being protected like I had been before. He resolved a lot of those fears for me. I don't think on the food side of the FDA that it is as bad as I feared that it might be. But it bears watching. You have to be diligently vigilant to make sure that industry is being regulated enough to maintain safety. If you go buy a $500 fish and then buy a $10 can of fish food, and your fish dies because the fish food is contaminated or diseased, it's going to be really clear to you how important this issue really is. And like I said, the doctor waylaid a lot of my fears. I'm not as concerned as I was when I first started on this. But I think it is incumbent on every fish hobbyist to maintain vigilance in this area. If defunding continues at the FDA to such a point that industry no longer is concerned about their products being tested, then basically what we're relying on is the goodwill of the industry to police themselves. Now, in the past, there have been several instances where industry did police itself. Hart's Mountain had a really bad salmonella problem. They would recalled a great amount of fish food that was tainted with salmonella. And to me, any fish food seller understands that their reputation is what causes us to buy their food. That we recognize that this is a fish food manufacturer that deals in quality. This is a fish food manufacturer that is not interested in cutting corners to increase their profit margin at the expense of the safety of the fishes that their customers are feeding. So, on the one hand, reputation is important to industry. They understand that brand reputation sells their products a lot of the time. But we do need to be concerned that greed can creep in and that profit margins can outweigh safety. Good luck, YouTube.